Jane Velez Mitchell, Jane Unchained Live Talk. We're very honored to have a very special guest with us here, Joe ENRIQUEZ Henry, who is with Lulac, which is one of the oldest, and in fact, the nation's oldest and largest Latino civil rights organization. Lulac is a national organization. You advise a national organization, but you're based in Iowa, where a lot of these slaughterhouses are that are really in the news right now. So you're making headlines. You're making headlines because according to, let's say, this article, you are calling for a meat boycott. Will you tell us what your upset is right now in terms of workers' rights, specifically slaughterhouse workers?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we are clearly concerned about the safety and health of the workers in these meatpacking plants across the country. There are 500,000 people who work in meat processing, 200,000 of which work on the lines in these meatpacking processing companies across the country, many of which are here in the Midwest. We're very concerned about the high speed of work, how workers work within inches of each other, how there is no mandatory testing right now. Workers are getting sick. They're going into hospitals. There's very little health care provisions for these workers, very little sick pay provided. And again, the workers are forced to basically do a death march into these facilities that are becoming incubators for the virus, or we would also consider them Chernobyls to the communities in which these meatpacking plants exist.
I want to show some photos that you provided to us. This is just a look at some of the working conditions. Obviously, there's no social distancing occurring in any of these three photos, one in the locker room, one in the men's room, and one on a line outside, directly outside the slaughterhouse walls, but part of the slaughterhouse operation. So we know that the Trump administration used the Defense Protection Act to designate slaughterhouses as critical infrastructure and send these workers in, even though meatpacking plants, slaughterhouses are the hotbeds, one of the three epicenters of coronavirus in the United States and Canada as well. We're talking about slaughterhouses, nursing homes, and prisons. But slaughterhouse workers are not going in as a first responder to save a life. They're not going into a nursing home to keep some elderly person alive. They're not going into a prison to feed a prisoner who would otherwise die. They're going in there to kill an animal, which does not necessarily need to be consumed. I mean, just for example, I haven't eaten meat in many, many decades, and here I am, okay? And there's millions of people around the world who are living proof that meat is not essential. And indeed, there's a growing number of articles in the Washington Post, for example. Our meat is more important than meatpacking workers, according to Trump. So what do you say to that, where the administration is essentially saying, no, they have to go in there and risk getting coronavirus, getting sick, dying, infecting their relatives, infecting other people in the community, because we're calling meat essential, even though obviously it is not essential.
Correct. Meat is only essential for the sake of the corporations that want to make money off of cheap meat. They want to sell it within the fast food industry, not only in this country, but across the world. Meat is something where, people used to be, when I was young, they might have it one day a week. But clearly right now, these meatpacking workers who in 1978 were making $17 an hour, here 42 years later, meatpacking workers are only making $16 an hour. Unsafe working conditions due to deregulation that have happened over the last several decades, due to union busting. These companies have have really encouraged many immigrants to work at these facilities, knowing that when they have hired undocumented immigrants, they have not also pushed for legal status, which has held these workers hostage, forcing them to work in these slave conditions, not able to really speak up or utilize their rights in the workplace. We know that, and we need to stop that. So again, what we're doing is Meatless May, which is probably going to become Meatless Nation after going into June, is we urge people to really reconsider what they purchase for consumption. This is an opportunity to do a consumer boycott. Boycotts have always been a powerful way to withhold buying power from corporations and bad actors. Opportunity here in May to really let these corporations know that we will not tolerate these slave conditions, unsafe working conditions. And we're also having to look at the family farmer. The family farmer has been held hostage by these by the setup of these meat processing facilities starting in the mid 1990s, where here in Iowa, Big Ag pushed a bill called HF 519, which allowed for the meat processing corporations to do vertical integration to hold pork farmers, pig farmers hostage by establishing these long-term contracts, flat fees for their hogs, forcing them to sell their hogs to Tyson, JBS, Smithfield, and the other large ones for a flat fee, which was lower than what those pigs could be sold on the open market. So we really do need to help not only the workers, but the farmers, but also protect our food supply at the same time. We should not have this concentration. It has led to this crisis right now, and it has forced the erosion of worker rights and the right of family farmers to make a decent living. So we really do need support on this boycott. We think it will resonate. Clearly, Americans are watching what's happening. They know that this virus is being incubated in these facilities across the country, and especially here in the Midwest. Within the next several weeks here in Iowa, I can only imagine how many more people will be infected due to the outbreaks that are happening at these facilities.
So you are saying to Americans and Canadians and people who are consumers, if you care about workers' rights, don't eat meat, boycott meat right now, so that these workers are not forced to go to their deaths because look at these conditions. And I'm just showing some of the photos that you sent us, but here's another reason. The inhumane treatment of these workers, even prior to this COVID-19 outbreak that has killed quite a few. The number keeps changing. Do you have the latest figure, by the way? Because I've heard 30, I've heard 40 plus workers.
It's 80 workers have died within these meatpacking plants now. 5,000 have been infected. When you look at the updates at the UFCW, the UFCW union that oversees and represents many of these workers, they have regular weekly updates on their website.
So you're saying 80 workers now have died. The number keeps jumping. It is absolutely horrifying. And look at this. This was an Oxfam report. Poultry workers denied bathroom breaks, wear diapers. Now, to me, this is so revolting, so dehumanizing. And yet, to your knowledge, well, Oxfam is a very well-respected organization. This is actually happening.
Oh, they're correct. And we were filing charges against JBS 5 years ago on exactly the same thing. Lulac has been working with meatpacking workers for many years. There were complaints that we filed here in Iowa against JBS for exactly the same thing. Workers were not allowed to take restroom breaks. They were urinating within their pants. They were told to wear diapers. There was miscarriages that happened due to the inhumane treatment of these workers. And this is what's so sad. This has been going on for a long time, but the crisis has really exposed this because people are concerned about where they're getting their food. But again, it's been happening for several decades. Workers forced to work in this inhumane conditions. Legalized slavery is what we would consider it. So we need it to stop. This is an opportunity for consumers, for Americans to really pressure in a very simple way. When they go into grocery stores, They should refuse to buy corporate processed meat, pork, and poultry. If they want to connect with family farmers and what we call the old-fashioned meat lockers, they can buy their meat there. But at the same time, having beans, rice, tortillas, and your vegetables is a healthy way to living. And the only thing that's going to change if we make sure that we get rights for workers and make sure that family farmers can survive and get decent pay is your Big Mac and your Whopper might cost more if we fight for the rights of workers and farmers. But the price of meat that you would put on your dinner table would not change. It is the fast food industry that really has made a lot of money off of this. And then across the globe, fast food has been what has been allowed these large multinational corporations to benefit from this slavery that has existed within these facilities.
Once again, we're talking to Joe ENRIQUEZ Henry of Lulac, which is the oldest Latino civil rights organization in the United States. You're an advisor to the national organization, and you're based and one of the directors in Iowa, where a lot of these slaughterhouses are based. And you are calling now for a meat boycott, which to me is an extraordinarily positive sign, because, you know, until we ask for what we want, we're not going to get it. And so you are saying essentially that workers are being sent to their possible deaths. 80 have already died. Yeah. Thousands of are affected because slaughterhouses are COVID-19 hotspots. And of course, the whole issue has been ratcheted up because President Trump used the Defense Production Act to declare meat processing plants essential infrastructure, critical infrastructure, despite the fact that the coronavirus outbreaks at these meatpacking plants were worse than anyone thought. And he said, basically, go in. And at the same time, weren't workers deprived of certain rights, like the right to say, hey, I'm sick, or I don't feel well, I don't want to go in, and not suffer the consequences, or to sue? I mean, in a sense, when you say it's modern day slavery, by being deprived of those rights, that would make it so. Can you clarify that?
Oh, yes. I mean, there were two lawsuits that were being prepared, one with workers in Missouri, the other one in South Dakota. So doing this executive order basically made those lawsuits null and void, taking away the civil liberties of Americans who work at these plants is not what America is all about. So we know for a fact that this executive order was a way to make sure that these multinational corporations, many of which are from overseas, like JBS is owned by two people from Brazil, and then we have China with Smithfield. So this was nothing more than a corporate grab, exploitation of workers, high profits. And, you know, it's time that we call attention to this. And I think it's clear right now, the American public is very aware of this. And clearly the American public wants to do something before November 3rd. This is an opportunity. This is like the great boycott we did with the United Farm Workers Union back in the 1960s, Cesar Chavez. So we boycotted grapes then and lettuce. People were not having their salads at the dinner table. They weren't having their grapes. Now we're asking people, instead of the beef, instead of the pork and poultry, have your vegetables, have your tortillas, beans, and rice. This is not hard to do. And for the sake of democracy in this country and the rights of workers, making sure that wages can be increased, safety in those environments, and making sure family farmers can do the job they need to do to protect our food supply and their living. Not hard to do. I
just want to jump in and say that the President Trump declaring slaughterhouses critical infrastructure under the Defense Production Act came soon after Tyson Foods started putting in full-page ads in newspapers saying the food supply chain is broken. Now, we're a plant-based operation. We're a nonprofit that promotes plant-based for human health, to fight climate change, for workers' rights, and for the lessening of pollution, et cetera. There's a lot of environmental racism that is inherent in animal agriculture in general, specifically these slaughterhouses, obviously. But to equate a food shortage with a meat shortage is completely misleading because, again, meat is not essential. In fact, it is a leading cause of lifestyle diseases like heart disease. There's no cholesterol in plant-based products. Heart disease, before coronavirus, was the leading killer in the United States, killing 1 out of every 4 people. Essentially, arteries getting clogged with cholesterol, and cholesterol only exists in animal products. So the idea that the thing that's killing us, causing climate change, is now being perversely described as something we have to have. It's really an insult to our intelligence. But this is the kind of, I would call, gaslighting that frequently occurs with our entire culture, where we're told that it's okay to eat animals no matter what, even if it's a leading cause of climate change, even if workers have to wear adult diapers, even if it's causing tremendous water pollution, even though it's primarily situated in communities of color, low-income communities. There's no slaughterhouses or concentrated animal feeding operations on Park Avenue or in Beverly Hills. And so the idea that despite all that it's being called an essential industry is really something that we need to challenge, because yes, as long as they call it essential, they can get away with it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, John, Jane, right on. You're correct in everything you're saying. And that is another reason to do this boycott, because we want to amplify the voices coming from the environmentalists, coming from the people who are not eating meat, those who have chosen to be vegetarians, to really bring up the history and the dynamics of what this is all about. We need to tell the truth. This is our opportunity to not only fight for workers and fight for farmers, but to fight for the environment, to fight for healthy living. 50% of the world's population does not have a diet of meat. It's usually beans and rice and other vegetables. We need to tell these stories right now. This is an opportunity to tell the truth. We need to get away from the gaslighting. Clearly, those of us who are older remember the days without meat. It wasn't a regular type of staple for us. So we have to tell these stories. We have to fight for workers and farmers. We fight for the environment, fight for healthy living, fight to end the toxic abuse. It really is incumbent upon us as good Americans and for elected leaders to do the right thing. This will be a point in time that will be remembered on what people did and what good organizations did. And that's why we're going to do a lot more on social media. We're going to take this meatlessmay.org. It's going to kind of change in the way that we explain things coming out of May, but we're going to explain all the things about healthy living, about cleaning up the environment, about saving the animals, how we need to get to healthy living, how we need to help the farmers and the workers. Great opportunities for structural change in our country if we fight hard enough. And it's so simple. It's just going into the grocery store and doing the right thing. That is one of the big things. And then helping people to understand what this is all about.
These are just some vegan options here. We promote plant-based eating for human health, obviously for animal welfare as well, and for reversal of climate change. And we've always been concerned about workers' rights. And indeed, we are also concerned about farmers. We know that farmers are being factory farmed as well. The small farmers have been pushed out, and they have literally become, in a way, modern day slaves to the big meat industry as well. And they are put in onerous loans. They make only tiny, tiny pennies off of each chicken, for example. They often have terrible health conditions. So we actually work to transition farmers who are raising chickens, for example, to raising something else like mushrooms, which is also a big source of protein, but it doesn't have all the horror associated with it. And, the vast majority of antibiotics used in this country are used on farm animals. That should tell you something. And of course, that increases antibiotic resistance as well in human beings who consume those animals. Because while the antibiotics are supposed to pass through the animals before they're slaughtered, we know that the USDA's inspection is incredibly lax, and some of the worst horrors have been discovered in undercover videos right there with the USDA inspectors standing right there turning a blind eye, because they're all part of this corrupt system. So let me ask you this question. Would you be willing to partner with other organizations and movements that are, have commonality? This
Yes.
is all about helping us use this time in isolation to transform and come out a more evolved culture. And so there's, for example, the SAVE movement. And there's the Animal Save movement, the Health Save movement, and the Climate Save movement. And they regularly hold vigils outside slaughterhouses all over the world to bear witness, based on the work of Leo Tolstoy, who said, if you see suffering, you have a moral obligation not to turn away and pretend it's not happening, but to get closer, see if you can help, and even if you can't help, to bear witness. And actually, I'm very much involved with the organization and the leader, Anita Krines, who was a PhD in Toronto. And we've been talking about how can we support the slaughterhouse workers, as well as give a moment of love and a sign of compassion to the animals entering the slaughterhouses. So would it be possible to connect you? Because there are 800 groups around the world. It could be a very powerful partnership.
Jane, we do. We want that support. We want to work in coalition. We want to spread the truth, the knowledge. We need to get that out there. For too long, the truth has been held hostage. It's been kept from people around the world. Yes, we need to form those coalitions and help spread the word in all different types of ways so we can save the planet, save the farmers, save the workers.
I want to talk about two other issues. And while we're talking about animal rights and human rights, there's been a big campaign to stop high-speed slaughter. So this is a campaign by Compassion Over Killing, for example, because under the Trump administration, they've been trying to speed up, and indeed have sped up, the slaughter process, which animal welfare advocates are horrified over, because these are sentient beings that are smarter than dogs, and the way they're being killed now rapidly, if a process doesn't hit the mark and the chance of it not hitting the mark increases as the speeds go up, then sentient beings can be skinned alive, boiled alive, et cetera, et cetera.
Jane, you have a good point there, because I got to tell you, one hog farmer was telling us a story last week. 8,500 hogs. He has had a contract with Tyson. Those hogs are not ready for Tyson to process. But what Tyson wants that hog farmer to do, he wants that farmer to slaughter 25 hogs a day. He wants that farmer to go out there and to just kill them. Now, we've had other hog farmers who've said to the public, please buy my hogs. I do not want to kill them. These hogs that are being sold to Tyson, JBS, Smithfield, and the others are being sold anywhere from $15 to 38 cents. Can you imagine that? So this is an opportunity for us to tell the truth and to help the farmers. We can encourage people, just buy these animals, make them pets. We don't need to slaughter them. We don't need that. But we do have to get that information out, because farmers do want to tell their story.
Yes, absolutely. And, the irony is now they're killing them because they can't kill them, which they call depopulation. So there's been a whole bunch of campaigns like spare the lives of these 2 million chickens that are being killed, as opposed to process. So when they kill them just to kill them because they don't have a slaughterhouse to send them to, they call it depopulation. And when they kill them at a slaughterhouse, they call it processing. And the idea that one is any different than the other, well, one might be marginally more cruel than the other, but killing is no kindness either way. So there's the whole issue of why keep forcibly inseminating these animals if there is a bottleneck in the system. This is the opportunity for these farmers to stop forcibly inseminating these animals. And you know what that is, because they're not making love on these factory farms. Let's put it that way. That way, instead of just depopulating them because the slaughterhouses are closed due to COVID-19, you would have less animals, and you would gradually allow people to transition to plant-based. So let me ask you a couple of questions in that regard. Donald Trump ordered Defense Protection Act, critical infrastructure. These slaughterhouses have to stay open, but I'm still reading that some of them are closing because people are dropping left and right, dying of coronavirus, getting sick. And what's the status of that? How many are open? How many are closed? Do you have any knowledge of what's happening in that arena?
Well, the information we're getting, anywhere from 20 to 30 of these meatpacking facilities have closed for a certain amount of time so far. Up to 40% of the pork production has shut down now in this country. And we know that this country basically serves the world when it comes to pork production. So they're shutting down. They're shutting down due to the outbreaks. Tyson in Waterloo, Iowa, over a third of the workers, over 1,000 workers were tested positive with the COVID, and then almost a fair number, well, I'm not a fair number, at least 3 to 4 of them have already died, workers at that Tyson facility. So the outbreaks are happening. They're going to continue to happen. One of the reasons is that there's not mandatory testing. The companies refuse to require mandatory testing. Why are they not doing that? Well, they don't want to tell the truth. They want to just go ahead and allow these workers to die, these Latinos and immigrant workers to die. And that's why we need public support to really force some regulation on these facilities. And as you said, to change the way in which things are done, to decentralize how food is processed, what is done, and what type of food we should be eating.
Now, I want to just ask you 2 quick questions. I know you're a busy man. I'll let you go in a second. But something that turned my stomach and made me feel so revolted and embarrassed that my tax dollars might be going to support this man. Trump's health secretary said it's the workers' home lives, not the working conditions, that are responsible for the outbreaks in the meatpacking plants. Here he is. Secretary Azar faulted workers' home and social conditions for meatpacking outbreaks. To me, that adds insult to injury, insult to death, that you send workers into these horrific situations where they could die. And by the way, I invite Tyson, Smithfield, JBS, anybody in the meat industry on any time. I'd love to dialogue with them and get their side of the story. But they're being sent to their possible deaths to infect possibly their relatives, their loved ones, their neighbors. And then at the same time, they're being insulted. Right. Even though coronavirus has now popped up in the White House. So right. By Azar's logic, is it the lifestyle of Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump and Ivanka that has caused the coronavirus outbreak inside the White House? That would be the logic. If you follow his twisted, really bigoted logic and you turn it on the people who are making that accusation, well, their lifestyle then should be questioned.
Yeah, Jane, I mean, these are racist statements. These are things that were used against African Americans during the civil rights movement, stating that such and such, that they weren't able to do this and that. We're hearing the same thing now. Many of our young people within the community are hearing this in the communities where they're at from people who want to spread these lies. So we know that we have to fight back. We know we have to tell the truth. This type of how should I say, rumor making and these statements will only last so long, because this virus is spreading. Things are going to be really bad. There's no way to stop it in the present condition, the way things are done. So it is going to shift. It is going to impact everybody. But until then, unfortunately, it's impacting Latinos. It's impacting immigrants. This is not the right thing. And again, this is why we need the public to really speak up here.
And let me say that I interviewed Kim Cordova, who is the union representative of factory workers in Greeley, Colorado, slaughterhouse workers. And she said, yes, it's Latino workers, but it's far more than that. There are 30 languages spoken at the meatpacking plant that she represents. And there are people from Africa, there are people from Bosnia, there are people from all over the world. Yes, it is to a large degree Latino workers, but beyond that, it's immigrants from all sorts of places.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah, so many different languages, many different groups, and the companies are not doing the things that they should be doing. We need to provide information in different languages to help these workers. Shame on those companies for not doing those things. But yes, very, very mean-spirited companies right now.
Now, again, they're all invited on. PETA placed this ad in the Washington Post, full-page ad, and there were also similar ads in other top newspapers around the country. America, it's time to move away from meat. Now, of course, PETA's People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, the largest animal rights organization in the world, the most effective one, the oldest one. Would you be willing to partner with PETA?
Oh, definitely. Again, Their cause is our cause. We need to be fighting for the same things. We need to amplify our voice. We're all about education and making sure people understand what is happening in this country, how they have alternatives. This again is a fight for workers, fight for farmers, the environment, the humane treatment of animals. We totally agree.
Now, one final piece of the puzzle. Recently, Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren proposed a bill to shut down large-scale factory farms. This was a big Newsweek story and was all over the country. Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker joined forces on bill to ban most factory farming by 2040. I mean, I think it should be 2022, but be that as it may, Cory Booker, of course, well known as a vegan presidential candidate, as well as a U.S. Senator from New Jersey. And I think that Elizabeth Warren didn't seem to me to be particularly open to any issues regarding factory farming and its impact on climate change until the workers' rights issue became a big factor. And now she seems to have, it's opened her eyes. I say, any port in a storm, whatever clicks with somebody, it's fine. And do you see now this becoming a political issue where essentially, if you're considering yourself liberal, progressive, somebody who supports workers' rights, somebody who is compassionate toward the plight of those who are of a lower socioeconomic background, that then they would be ethically obligated to do what you're saying, which is boycott meat.
Right. Well, it would. And that's the purpose of the boycott. The boycott is to connect all the dots, make all the connections, make it clear to elected leaders that with the boycott, as the boycott builds, elected leaders will realize, hey, everybody's jumping on board. I better make sure I jump on board. I better make sure I make my statements. I would hope that this proposal they have, I agree with you. It should be 2022. It should not be 2040. I don't know why 2040. I live in a state with hog farmers. They could easily transition to different forms of farming. So, yes, the boycott connects all the dots. It holds elected leaders accountable. It resonates. It resonates with a lot of young people. Many young people are vegans at this point in time. We see that a lot. And again, young people within the Latino community, 60 million Americans are Latinos. The median age is 27. So many of our people are young and they're seeing their parents and their relatives working at these plants. So they will be voting for for people who support the cause of workers, support the cause of their family members. So this is important for elected leaders to follow, for candidates to follow. They should be talking about this. Shame on those elected leaders who are not talking about this issue right now and taking a stand. Some are waiting till November 3rd. Shame on them. We have many elected leaders who are Democrats who are not doing anything right now other than sitting in their offices talking about policy. We should not be talking about policy. We should be getting off the sidewalk into the streets, protesting, utilizing our pocketbooks to demand for rights in the workplace, rights for farmers, health, rights for livestock. I mean, alternatives. So shame on any of them for not doing the right thing now.
You just nailed it. All these different disparate elements are coming together, and we're starting to see this industry as the plague that it is. Remember, most experts agree that it started in a wet market, which is a slaughterhouse. It's just you pick up your meat right there in China. And zoonotic diseases, whether it's mad cow disease, or avian flu, swine flu, pose a very serious threat for future pandemics. So there are so many reasons for us to get on board with your boycott. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. What an incredible, incredible effort. Any way that Jane Unchained can help you, we will be there, and I will connect you with these other organizations that would love to partner with you, I'm sure.
Thank you, Jane. Meatlessmade.org. Please go to it. Thank you.
I love it. Thank you. Bye-bye, Joe.
Bye. Take care.